Hello everyone, I am Halcyon and I would like to welcome you back to Bandits Ballads. Before we begin, there's something I gotta get off my chest. This series isn't doing too well and I'm having trouble finding motivation to work on it. That's why the first episodes had a like requirement, because I knew that without your involvement, this type of content would struggle to gain any traction. That said, even if future episodes get no views whatsoever, I am committed to giving this series a proper ending. An open ending as well, because maybe a miracle will happen, and in that case, I'd like to jump back into the action and explore the adventures of King Balon. It'll be a while till we get there, however, so without further ado, let us briefly recap everything that transpired thus far. It took Balon Blacktide 6 chapters to make peace with one faction and earn 80,000 dinars, and in the 7th episode he effortlessly doubled that. I'd say we're in a pretty good place for the moment. So it's time to expand our raiding operations south into Aserai territory, since they're the wealthiest faction. They've gotta be, nobody dares to venture deep into the desert, which means that their settlements are mostly unraided and it's up to me to fix that. But first, let's deal with these bandits. It's free loot, basically. Oh, never mind, an imperial lord wants to join the fight and cut into my earnings. I'll leave them all to Popelia. Before venturing into the Nahasa wastes, however, I have to get ready, which is why I offloaded my prisoners to the ransom broker in Ortizia, and then took a quick pit stop in the village of Lycia for no particular reason. But once I arrived in there, one of the notables asked me for a favor, promising to pay a lot of money if I agreed to help. I'm not in the business of helping others, but this is right up my alley, because the job is to beat some bandits into submission and then bring them to this village where they'd be used as forced labor in the salt mines. Back home in the Iron Islands, we just called them thralls, and it didn't matter whether they were criminals or not. Our laws permitted us to use anyone we captured in our raids. But the land of Calradia has its own laws, and the foreman does not wish to be caught enslaving soldiers, villagers, or traders. Therefore, bandits are all he's allowed to use in his mines. It looks like I'll be putting my visit to the desert on hold, because this definitely sounds like a job for me. Only problem is, there's not a whole lot of outlaws around here, so I'll have to travel back north into Vlandia, because that's where I saw the highest concentration of criminal activity. To be fair, I did commit most of that crime, but I'm not about to turn myself in to labor in the mines as a show of repentance. On my way there, I spotted a mountain bandit hideout, and I considered it to be a worthy first target. So I replaced my axe with a mace to make my strikes non-lethal and take as many captives as possible, and together with my SWAT team comprised of 9 Battanian Fians, we've executed a no-knock raid upon the outlaws. Because I wanted to keep enemy casualties at a minimum, the plan was for me to do most of the work while my archers watch from afar and only intervene if I bite more than I can chew. I almost gave them the order to attack when the very first enemy hit me in the chest with his machete. If it weren't for the armored bearskin I stole from the Battanians, I might not have survived that hit. That was some commendable effort, but after a day's work, one must rest. So I helped this hillbilly take a nap with a couple hits from Lullaby. That's the name of my mace. The following 2 bandits were isolated, so it was easy to take care of them myself. But when I saw the next 3 sitting together, I gave my archers the order to shoot, and once we balanced the odds, they were told to hold fire once more while I bonked the remaining brigand with my club. And that's how I took care of all the bandits and saved as many lives as I could. Now, I would like to tell you that I cleared this hideout without any trouble, but I'd be lying, because at one point, I noticed some cracks in my shield and I realized it wouldn't have survived for much longer, so I ran back to the brigand I knocked out, dropped my spears on the ground and grabbed his shield as well, to have a backup when mine eventually breaks. After knocking out whoever I could and killing the rest, I was granted an audience with the illustrious leader of this particular organization, and he challenged me to a duel. If I win, his boys surrender to me, and if he wins, I leave them the hell alone. Sounds like a deal. I have to admit I did not play fair because my weapon was already in my hand, but the opponent was still unarmed. So I snuck in a cheap shot before he pulled out his shield and blocked my following few attacks. But I defended myself from them, and after a couple more slaps, he was out cold. Figuratively speaking, he was still warm, alive, and would make an excellent worker for the mines, along with his 6 sergeants and everyone else we've apprehended. All in all, we've captured 16 people and the village needed a minimum of 18, so I wouldn't go there just yet. Instead, I'd keep going towards Vlandia to capture more thralls, but on my way there, I've spotted something even better. A hostile caravan. Hostile because it belonged to an enemy kingdom, not because it had any hostile intentions towards me. In fact, it tried to escape, but I couldn't let that happen. Luckily for me, the panic clouded the merchant's judgment and they tried running up a mountain they couldn't climb, so they were quite literally stuck between a rock and a hard place. When I caught them, I initially pretended that my only intention was to trade, and I did, selling all the spoils of my prior bandit hunting and caravan raiding to these guys in exchange for 7,000 dinars. They were carrying a total of 13,000, so if I could get the rest of their money, that would be great. What the traders didn't anticipate is that I was planning to get my loot back, as well as everything else they were carrying, through good old-fashioned robbery. This fight wasn't much different from our most recent caravan raid, with the sole exception being that I fought my enemies on foot, knocked a couple of heads around and got hit by a few arrows. The only thing of note that happened in this fight was the manner in which I was knocked out. You see, this archer was busy fighting my men, so I snuck in from behind, ready to smash his noggin, and not only did my mace bounce off his thick skull, but he somehow turned around just as he swung his weapon at my guys and hit me instead. Then the moron got scared and tried making a run for it, and he would have gotten away if I was still conscious to give my men the order to fall back, but alas, my riders caught up and put him down. Nobody won from this. The trader lost his life, and I lost the ability to rob this caravan. Even so, I got another 500 gold coins and a lot of the cargo it was carrying, so it's not all bad. But it kind of feels like a participation trophy when I know I could have taken more. We also captured 12 of these merchants, but due to institutional discrimination, they would not be accepted to work in the mines of Lycia since they're not outlaws. But because they were dragging me down, I took them to Sargot and received 2,000 dinars from the ransom broker, which is a decent sum, since capturing survivors isn't even the main focus of my raids. In addition to that, my rogue skill also increased a little, but I'm going to need a faster way of developing it. After I left the city, I spotted another caravan and I did chase it for a while, but the human merchandise I was carrying was dragging my party down, so I had to let it go. Because I did not know where to find more bandits, I kept traveling north, eventually going past the city of Galend. And after riding for an entire day, I finally found a gang of sea raiders which I caught and captured without any resistance. 16 plus 5 equals more than 18, that's for sure, and I could have taken these boys back to Lycia, but the foreman said he could use more than 18 and he's willing to pay extra, so I scoured the lands for more victims. And my efforts paid off, because not only did I discover a sea raider hideout, but also caught another gang of 16, 11 of which tragically died. Next I was planning to hit the hideout, but for the following 3 days, more and more gangs of raiders showed up and I couldn't just let them pass. When I dealt with all of them, I did eventually ambush the raiders in their hidey hole. In this fight, I was planning to do the exact same thing I've done when I attacked the mountain bandits. Knock them out myself and rely on the archers when outnumbered. After smashing a raider's skull, I remembered the mistake I've done in my previous ambush and picked up his shield, to have a backup when mine is inevitably splintered by the enemy's axes. The rest of our attack went more or less exactly as I was expecting, but at some point I got tired of running at the enemies myself, so I ordered my men to charge them, an action that cost 2 of my Fians their lives. The duel with the raider boss was not easy, however. His battle axe broke my shield in 3 hits and I had to parry with my mace to buy myself time to run away and equip my second shield, but with patience and a bit of luck, I did eventually manage to defeat him and his 12 followers joined my gang. as prisoners, although I had to release 8 of the cheaper scumbags I was carrying to make room for more valuable merchandise. And because I now had 53 laborers for the mines, I was ready to turn them in. But halfway towards the village, I was surprised to find out that my mission failed because it took me too long to round up the workforce. As such, the foreman must have run out of patience and reached a compromise with the village workers, and now I was stuck with this lot. I put in a lot of effort to get these boys together, and it seems like I can no longer find them gainful employment. I could just cut my losses and give them to the ransom broker for 1/10 of their value, or I could wander through friendly mining settlements and hope that another notable has a similar request to that in Lycia. While traveling through the highlands, I noticed that war is back on the menu for the Battanians and the Vlandians, and even though I'm no longer hostile towards any of them, perhaps there's another way I could profit from this conflict. For now, let's focus on finding a new career for the bandits that I've captured. After checking out multiple villages, I eventually arrived to the silver mines of Druimore, where one of the notables was actually looking for cheap labor that I was willing to provide. But when I offered to give him my workers, he refused, stating that the two of us do not have good history. What? What the hell did I do to this guy to make him hate me? I mean, I did force some of his lads to join my crew and killed the militia when they tried to stop me, but as far as I know, those actions do not lower your standings with the notables. Only raiding does, and I do not remember pillaging this village. Oh well, it looks like I'll be taking my business elsewhere. A couple of days later, I made my way to the iron mine of Beglomuar near Maronath, where none of the notables had any jobs for me. However, the Sturgian caravan that I caught here did have a job. Please raid us. I'm happy to oblige, my dear fellows, but first you're going to buy my loot and give me all your money. After I got their 10,000 gold, I was going to retrieve my property. This raid was a bit different from my previous ones because these lads adhered to the principle of the best defense is a good offense. Their cavalry did not hesitate to charge at us, and I have to admit I was a bit surprised by that turn of events. Surprised but not unprepared, because my infantry held the line and my horsemen countercharged the enemy. Needless to say, after their initial push, the caravan guards couldn't do much, and while their horsemen tried to get an angle on my rangers, my boys already took care of theirs. It wasn't long until their surviving archers took to their heels, at which point I ordered all of my men to hold their fire, sit still, and let them escape. The more times we can attack them, the more loot we can obtain. By the time I was done, 2 of these fellers were out of harm's way until I decided I only needed one of them to commit a proper robbery. Before we talk about it, let's see what we got from this first assault. A pair of chainmail boots that I shall equip because they offer quite a bit of protection, a shield that's a lot more durable than mine, 14 pairs of wrapped shoes which I sold to this caravan, 54 shipments of fish, 28 units of wood, 19 batches of iron ore, and the rest of their cargo, which I will not mention because if I do, we'll be here for an hour. When we were done sifting through the belongings of the slain men, we turned our gaze towards the trader that escaped, and since he was overburdened by the weight of his cargo and his survivor's guilt, we easily caught up to him and I softly whispered my favorite phrase, "Your money or your life." He could not live with himself after leaving his friends for dead, so he chose the second option. Unfortunately for him, my men just knocked him out and he would have to live with his guilt for the rest of his life. As for the loot we got now, let's take a look. 7 pairs of wrapped shoes, which is half of what I got the first time, 27 fish, half, 13 wood, which is almost half, and 10 iron, which is more than half of what we got in the first attack. I'm pretty sure that if this lad chose to surrender his cargo, we would have gotten everything, but as things stand, I still got 75% of his stuff, which is good enough, and when we consider the fact that I also relieved the caravan of all of its money, I'd say this raid was pretty damn good. Not perfect, since it did not result in a robbery, but very good. Problem is, I captured the 20 traders who survived this assault, and my prisoner capacity was already full, so I'd have to crawl until we reached the town of Maronath and ransom these fellas. But when I got close to Maronath, another problem arose. The city was under siege and I would have had to drag my prisoners all the way to Seonon. And if I were to do so in my current situation, the most expensive of the bunch would have made their escape. To prevent that from happening, I gave my cheapest prisoners their freedom. Before I arrived in Seonon, however, I heard rumors that the notables of Brynglass might have a job for me. And since that village is built on an iron mine, the job could be the one I've been looking for. When I arrived, I found out that it was. Luckily for Lid of Brynglass, I already had the workforce with me, so this was only a matter of getting paid. But there was another hair in the soup. The leader of the miners' union, also called Lid of Brynglass, asked me not to do this because then he and his workers cannot extort Lid of Brynglass for higher wages. I could have broken my agreement, or I could have shared the profits with these miners, but instead I told Lid to piss off because I worked too damn hard to round up all these thralls. This kinda lowered my standing with Lid 2, but Lid 1 was going to pay me a lot of money for this, so it was worth it. I hope that when Lid 2 denies me a job opportunity in the future, I'll remember what I've done to piss him off and not ask myself, "But what did I do to this guy to make him hate me?" Anyway, because Lid 1 could have used more than the 37 I brought him, I was planning to scour the lands for more prisoners and increase my payout, but the traders we've captured were slowing us down, so they needed to be ransomed in Seonon, where they fetched almost 4k. As I went to search for more workers, I ran into a few looter gangs, but only 6 of the fellas survived the brutality of my men. And because I did not want to fail the mission and waste all my effort, I took the decision to bring these idiots to Lid 1 and close the deal. You wanna know what this month of hunting bandits earned me? 13,100 dinars. The Sturgian caravan that I caught brought me 13,700, plus a lot of loot. I think I'm done working for others and instead I'll focus on doing what I'm supposed to do. Reaving, raiding, and plundering. This is Bandits' Ballads after all, and not Manhunter's Memoirs. Maybe I'll do some favors for some people here and there if I feel like it, but when it comes to getting paid, it's better to stick to doing what I'm best at. But those looter fights weren't entirely fruitless because while I was chasing the scavengers, I realized that the siege of Marunath is still ongoing and my dormant merchant instincts have briefly awoken. Perhaps I can quickly buy something cheaply in Seonon, park outside Marunath and wait for the siege to come to an end and then make some huge profits. Before making any purchases, I paid a visit to one of the local crime bosses who wanted to sell me some stolen goods for less than half of their market value. 49 silver ore for 1984 gold coins, that's about 40 gold per unit, so as long as I found a town willing to pay more than that, I'd make some easy profit. After I took the deal, a jelly merchant came by and told me he's willing to pay 1588 gold to return that silver to its rightful owner, but I told him to piss off. Then I went to the market, spent 5k on a variety of trade goods and set off towards Marunath, but when I got there, the siege was already over because the Battanians launched a counter-offensive against the attacking Imperials. Because I needed the prices to increase a bit more, I decided to wait in town until a caravan approaches and only then make a sale. I did not exactly keep track of what I bought and what I stole, but the goods I sold here made me 12,000 dinars, and together with the looted weapons and armor, they brought a total of 27 grand. And because the fighting outside the town was interesting, I wanted to stop and watch it from afar, and needless to say, the imps found themselves in a bit of a pickle because the defenders heavily outnumbered them. When the Battanians won, they captured everyone they could and imprisoned the imperial nobles in their dungeons, which gave me an idea. Why don't I try to rescue one of them? Some connections with the nobility could be helpful in the future. So I bribed my way into the keep, paid a visit to the dungeon and asked the warden to tell me about who's imprisoned here. He didn't mention everyone because he was too ecstatic telling me how he's captured 3 of the Emperor's closest relatives, his daughter Nadia and 2 of his distant cousins. Because Garios's clan doesn't like me very much, perhaps I can improve my relations by rescuing one of their people. I'm not looking to make friends, but it's useful to have as few enemies as possible, even as a raider. I doubt Garios cares about his cousins very much and would prefer if his daughter was rescued from the dungeons, and so I bribed the warden to facilitate her escape. It cost me 4,400 to make him forget to lock her cell, and after he left, I snuck in and offered to escort Milady out of the prison like the simp I am. But the other guards were not bribed and therefore would fight to keep their POW as per their instructions, so I'd have to kill them. First guy I see is a Battanian hero wielding a two-handed sword. Problem is, he saw me as well and he came running to whoop my ass. I wasn't ready for violence to start so suddenly, but I tried defending myself against his overhead strike and thought that after I parry his attack, I can just wipe him out, but he feinted and struck me in the right shoulder before I could even react. The hit came with such force that I instantly collapsed. The last thing I saw before passing out was Nadia getting her neck sliced by the same sword. Because I wasn't a sworn enemy of the Battanians, I was simply thrown out of the dungeon, and even though my prison break attempt was unsuccessful, the trauma made me remember a few raiding tricks from back in the day. I reckon that if I were successful, I'd have developed my skill even better. But I am saddened by the fact that my failure caused Nadia's death. There is, however, a silver lining. Nobody knows that I caused it, and if I ever need a rival dispatched without staining my own name, I could quietly do it when he's imprisoned. Speaking of personal development, throughout my recent adventures, my skill in stewardship also increased, and I could now choose between the ability to invest in my own soldiers' development or become a more efficient raider. While the first option is very useful, there's a similar ability further down the line, so I chose the second one. But I wanted to forget about that stinging failure, as well as the time I wasted running other people's errands, so I needed a win. As I was contemplating my next step, a caravan belonging to the Northern Empire strolled right past me into the city of Maronath, and I waited for it to come out. When it did, it moved too quickly and I couldn't catch it, so I needed to find a slower one. Eventually, my prayers were answered when I spotted another Sturgian caravan traveling around, and I obviously started chasing it. The convoy was moving a bit faster than my gang, but Battania is full of forests where I have the mobility advantage, so I wasn't worried about losing them. And I didn't even have to lead them into the woods. The caravaneers almost ran themselves off a cliff, and they were trapped between a gaping pit and the walls of Seonon, where I easily caught them and, you know. If I had anything to trade, I would have taken their money first, but everything I had was sold in Maronath. So the only thing left to do was tell them to hand over everything they have. They obviously refused. What is it with these idiots not realizing that they're signing their own death sentence? Just give me what I want and then you can walk away, start again, and maybe even make a fair bit of profit by the time I catch you again. But no, we're paid to guard this caravan, so if you want to rob it, it's over our dead bodies. Fine, if you insist, I'll give you what you want and take whatever I can. When the battle began, my men assumed their standard formations and my companions were assigned to be the captains of my troops, slightly improving their combat proficiency. Then I waited to see whether my enemy is defensive or aggressive so I can react accordingly. Just like the previous Sturgian caravan, these lads chose to attack. So my infantry held the shield wall in front of the archers while my horsemen charged at the incoming cavalry with full force. As for myself, I chose to stay near my archers and take care of anyone who gets close to them, and that worked pretty well. After the threat of their cavalry was neutralized, all of my men were ordered to rush towards the enemy archers and take them out as quickly as possible. In the meantime, I'd be right in the middle of the action, keeping an eye on the whole situation and stabbing whoever I could. As soon as I heard the traders crying for their mummies, I knew that their morale broke, so I immediately ordered my men to cease their shooting and fall back, because I needed the cowards to survive. By the time we were done, only 3 of their archers managed to run away. Perhaps now that we've given them a demonstration of what we are capable of, the survivors would be more willing to part with their material possessions, but before we see what they do, let's take a look at what we've got. 905 gold coins, which leads me to believe that the traders carry a total of 9,050, 29 units of fish, which is probably half, 13 shipments of butter, 5 cows, and so on and so on. The only reason I take these trade goods into account is because I want to see what I'll get next time, so I can figure out how the quantum mechanics of looting works. The stuff we got is good and will fetch a lot of profit, but there's no reason to spend too much time talking about it. After we swept up the loot, we resumed our pursuit for the 3 remaining traders, and this time, they were severely slowed down by their herd of mules, as well as all the stuff they were holding, so if I didn't catch them, another gang certainly would. When I told them to give up, they offered to pay me 918 dinars just to leave them be. But the time for negotiations has passed, so I told them that this is an all-or-nothing kind of deal. After witnessing 39 of their buddies get killed and another 8 get captured, the survivors finally came to their senses and agreed to my offer, giving me their remaining 8,151 dinars, as well as everything they were left with after my initial raid. 29 fish, 13 butter, and 4 cows, in addition to the rest of the stuff that I will not bother mentioning. So my suspicions are correct. The only way to claim everything that a caravan is carrying is to commit a proper robbery and convince the traders to give it to you. Brute force can only get you so far. Without a bit of rugged charm, you'll never go all the way through a merchant's belongings. But other than my intimidating demeanor and my gang of bloodthirsty raiders, the survivors had another reason to part with their wares. We could kill them, sure, but even if we let them go, another gang of bandits would have certainly caught them, and there's no telling what else they had in store for them. Now these traders are light on their feet and can make their way to the nearest town, rebuild their caravan and live peacefully until they run into me again. And by the time they do, if they're really lucky, I might have already made peace with Sturgia and they'll have no reason to fear me. After this transfer of wealth, all that was left for me to do was head into the nearest town and sell everything I took. All in all, this got me another 12k, bringing the total income from this caravan robbery to 21,000 dinars. Let's hope we'll get more of these in the future. However, in order for future chapters to exist, this one must come to an end, but not before we take a moment of self-reflection to see just how far we've come. In terms of money, I only earned another 60k since the beginning of the chapter, but that's not as important as the knowledge that I've gained. The knowledge to optimize my caravan raiding technique to get the most out of my banditry. And in addition to that, I also learned what I have to do in order to develop my rogue skill and squeeze even more from my life of crime. Rescue nobles from imprisonment. Unfortunately, I have to make peace with the kingdoms that these nobles belong to, which is a bit counterintuitive because constant raiding should be a better teacher of banditry than this, but alas, that's how my peculiar mind works, and if I have to spend a couple of years running around breaking people out of prison to become a better outlaw, I'll do it with no more complaints. For now, it is time to say our farewells. So, thank you lads very much for watching, and I better see you next time. Goodbye.